Hello and welcome to part 1 of another Ukraine war update. This is a cut and watered down version of my last Ukraine war update, which fell victim to a bunch of people who want to silence me and an army of bots. The full 55+ minute long version of this update is viewable on my private Telegram channel or on my Ko-fi page. The link is in the description. By the way, part 2 for YouTube is coming faster than you think. If you appreciate the tremendous effort I put into this video, please show so with a like and comment. It really helps me out a lot. Thank you. Before we start with the footage, let's have a look at the map to get a better overview of the situation. Based on geolocated footage, we can identify 7 regions where the fighting is currently concentrated. This includes the regions around Kupiansk, Kreminna, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, Robotyne, and the larger Kherson area. Overall, Russia is exploiting Ukraine's shortage of ammunition for artillery and the lack of anti-air defense systems, and remains on the offensive on several fronts with a special focus on the Donetsk region. After the fall of Avdiivka, Russian forces pushed the front line further west and captured 3 more small villages west of the city. From there, they proceeded to seize large parts of Orlovka and Tonink. Currently they attempt to capture Berdychi but have so far failed to break through the Ukrainian lines there. In Berdychi, most of the fighting took place on these 2 small roads connecting the village with Stepov. This is most likely due to the fact that the surrounding fields are heavily mined, what restricts Russian, but also Ukrainian movement, forcing both sides to maneuver through a narrow path constantly observed by drones, what makes any attempt to advance costly for each side. A Russian BTR pushes into Berdychi while being tracked by a Ukrainian drone. The vehicle drops a squad of infantry close to the Ukrainian lines. The Russian soldiers hit the dirt and take position behind a fence right on the spot where they were dropped off. A Ukrainian Bradley arrives on the scene to engage the Russian soldiers caught in the open. It's possible that the plan was to wait for another squad scheduled to arrive later. Alternatively, they might have encountered Ukrainian forces inside the houses, who pinned them in the open to be engaged by the Bradley in a sort of L-shaped ambush. They definitely faced northwards, while the Ukrainian lines were located west of their position. This video here shows yet again another BTR assault in a sector defended by a Ukrainian Bradley. The Bradley sneaks up on one of the BTRs and fires at it from extreme close range using its 25mm Bushmaster cannon. As often mentioned, the armor of the BTR is pretty thin, so every higher caliber goes through its hull like a knife through butter. As a result, the BTR is destroyed. There was also footage from the turret of a Bradley during a similar situation, but I cannot say for sure if it's the same BTR, even if the chances are high. All in all, the battle for Berdychi is fought like the battle for Stepov, meaning lots of action in very narrow space. Here we see an abandoned BTR that got stuck in a crater being taken out by a FPV drone. It won't be the last stuck armored vehicle of this update. Here one more BTR with a squad of infantry on top of it crashes and gets stuck in a ditch. The soldiers are left on their own without a ride. And this BTR here lands inside a pond and drones under. Normally the BTR is able to swim, but seems like it got stuck because of the angle and mud inside the pond. The Ukrainian military did everything in their might to hold off the endless Russian waves of attacks and even sent the M1 Abrams into battle. However, there are already reports of at least 3 Abrams being taken out so far, with at least one video showing clearly how one got disabled. The crew, however, survived. Russia also released footage of 2 Russian soldiers rushing to inspect another disabled M1 Abrams, but the overall pace and look of the video has propaganda written all over it. It is clear that they are in a hurry and just wanted to climb inside at one time just for the show. This, however, does not change the fact that the Abrams was disabled. But this does also not change the fact that this is not the giant victory against the Western war machine they want to portray. Sorry, the world is not that black and white. Despite fierce resistance by the Ukrainians, Russia's willingness to sacrifice large amounts of men and equipment even for minor gains creates results, and by the time I am sitting on this update, the southern part, including the village's main road, was captured, and Berdychi is now at the risk of falling in the next days. This Ukrainian tank scored a direct hit from close range on an approaching Russian BMP, which drove right in front of the tank's barrel in Orlovka. After receiving a direct hit to its front armor, the BMP continued driving towards the tank but was, however, taken out of action. Shortly after, it came to a standstill in a tree line where the burning wreck of a second Russian IFV could be seen, most likely also taken out by the Ukrainian tank. It should be noted that the region around Avdiivka has witnessed a very high number of visually documented armor-on-armor engagements. Many of these engagements involved the M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. Similar to the previous clips, a huge portion of them was filmed during close-range engagements. Here we can see a Bradley finishing off a Russian BMP-2 with its autocannon. This BMP was most likely already abandoned, but you might remember that in a previous update on the Ukraine war, there was also one case of a direct force-on-force confrontation between another Russian BMP and a Bradley. It is interesting that most of these engagements were at very close range, considering that one of the strengths of the Bradley, in particular, is its high accuracy even at greater distances. However, I believe the nature of the battle and the terrain led to this. Most of these engagements were documented in either Stepov or Berditschi, where, as mentioned before, the entire battles took place in very narrow spaces. A Bradley was even used against its own kind when it engaged a disabled Leopard 2 alongside another Bradley, in order to prevent the Russians from making use of them should they capture both. A significant moment for the history books occurred when a group of Bradleys faced off against a Russian T-90 tank in combat. They successfully disabled it, paving the way for a subsequent FPV drone strike in Stepov. The Bradleys, operated by Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade, effectively used their 25mm cannons to disable the tank's optics. This targeting caused the T-90's turret to spin uncontrollably and ultimately crash into a tree. Despite the T-90M being Russia's most advanced battle tank, with sophisticated armor and firepower, the Ukrainian Bradley's precise and rapid fire managed to outmaneuver and overpower it. The Bradleys aimed at the juncture of the hull and turret, a known vulnerable point, and their strategy was effective. This encounter is noteworthy as it showcases the Bradley's effectiveness against a formidable adversary like the T-90M. This video, released earlier this year, has received considerable coverage from various channels. A major question raised was why the T-90 was operating alone. However, I consider this a common occurrence in this war, with both sides known to employ single units, especially for preparing assaults or providing relief to forces under pressure. This might have been the case here, considering how Russian troops proceeded to gain ground in Stepov. After suffering high losses in their initial push towards Avdiivka, Russian forces reportedly began sending small squads to platoon-sized infantry elements with the objective of occupying positions, particularly in the basements of the many ruins of small houses in the area. The Ukrainians often dispatched Bradleys to deal with these kinds of situations. It's highly likely that the Russian unit originally targeted by one of the Bradleys requested armored support, leading to the dispatch of the T-90 to assist the squad under pressure. However, this is not a confirmed account, and I am not claiming to provide the ultimate truth. It's however a plausible explanation, but what do you think? Again, very large portions of this fight took place on extremely close range, as you can see here. It's unfortunate that the video quality is quite low. Hopefully, a higher resolution version will be released in the future if it exists. The chance of this, however, is low. Here, we witness the crew beginning to lose control of the turret, which starts spinning, causing the tank to crash into a tree. Subsequently, it was targeted by an FPV drone, as you will soon see. The crew survived and escaped. According to a Ukrainian soldier who served as a gunner on one of the Bradleys, he experienced issues with his armor-piercing rounds. As a result, he effectively used high explosive rounds, targeting the T-90 tank's sensors to render the tank inoperative. Interestingly, he mentioned learning about the tank's vulnerabilities through playing video games. Most Russian IFVs are vulnerable to any caliber beyond 50, but the T-90 is an entirely different challenge, which makes this clip so significant. Despite incredible documented battlefield performance during the battle for Avdiivka, the Bradley is not indestructible and could not hold off the Russian waves forever, as the results on the maps show. This of course also comes due to the fact that they only have a limited amount of them available, but for this they outperformed every single Russian asset out there so far. Ukraine on their side claims to have shot down an extreme high number of Russian warplanes since the start of 2024, but still this is not enough, and here we can see a Russian warplane flying freely above Avdiivka. Another factor contributing to Russia's recent advances is the effective and massive use of cheap glide bombs. These bombs can be dropped out of range of most anti-air defense systems, far behind the front line. They are inexpensive, very difficult to intercept, precise and devastating. As widely known, Russia has traditionally focused on ground-based fires, such as artillery, while NATO has adopted a more air-based strategy. In this aspect, it could be said that Russia has partially adopted a NATO-like approach with the use of these glide bombs. But that is not all, as you will see later. This creates a dilemma where Ukraine has to bring its already limited air defense assets closer to the front line, where they then are at risk of being spotted and engaged as high-value targets by Russia. This has not only led to the destruction of a Norwegian advanced surface-to-air missile system, as you could just witness here, but even to what looks like the first confirmed destruction of 2 Patriot launchers that were first mislabeled as S-300 systems. It has to be said that the footage is pretty grainy, but multiple sources stated that it is likely that this was indeed a pair of Patriot launchers. Seems like Russia has employed some sort of NATO-like mission-type tactics paired with improved intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities to hunt for such high-value systems, because the list of assets recently destroyed goes on. Russia not only managed to destroy air defense systems but also documented a strike on 3 Ukrainian Mi-8 or 17 helicopters using cluster munitions. As a result of the strike, 2 of the helicopters were destroyed. Looks like the cluster munitions first disabled the helicopters, who were then struck again by precision munitions. 2024 also marks the year of Ukraine's first documented loss of a high-mobility artillery rocket system. According to Russian sources, an Iskander-M was used to destroy the HIMARs near the village of Avdiivka in the Donetsk region, around 40 kilometers from the front line. While the loss of a single HIMARS isn't that significant at the moment, the fact that Russia might step up their ISR game and employ the working fast mission-type tactics system to successfully strike high-value targets like this more often from now on should be at least considered to be a possible future concern. Russia also claims to have already destroyed a second HIMARS, but here footage leaves room for much speculation, and pro-Ukrainian sources already mentioned this could very well have been a decoy. Here we have very rare footage of a Ukrainian Humvee Avenger system in action as it gets hunted by what was reported as a Russian Lancet drone system. The Avenger launched 2 surface-to-air missiles who both missed but gave the Avenger precious time to get away. We need to talk a bit about the fall of Avdiivka, as there seems to be an impression that I became unusually quiet on this channel following that event. The truth is, I've been mostly inactive since the beginning of the year. This inactivity wasn't due to the fall of Avdiivka or Russia's recent gains. In fact, I'm very transparent about these issues. My lack of activity was primarily due to a combination of winter depression and my commitment to watching tutorials to improve the quality of the maps and production in my videos, which you might have noticed in this latest one. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Now, back to Avdiivka. Its fall was influenced by several factors: the mentioned lack of artillery munitions and air defense, Russia's willingness to sacrifice troops, its effective use of massive amounts of glide bombs, war fatigue in the west, and also General Syrskyi's decision to relinquish the city. This allowed Ukrainian troops to fall back to, in their words, more favorable positions. This decision marked a 180-degree turn from General Syrskyi's earlier strategy during the defense of Bakhmut, where he maintained control of the city for as long as possible. There are 2 main reasons for this change in strategy, one military and one political. From a military standpoint, the constant Russian pressure and their numerical superiority meant that the city would have eventually fallen into Russian hands anyways, and Ukraine could only have delayed this. Furthermore, by the time the decision to withdraw was made, the city was primarily defended by the 47th Mechanized Brigade and the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, who had just been relocated to the area. Both are among Ukraine's most effective elite brigades. They were at risk of encirclement within the town, so to preserve their fighting capability, the decision to pull back was the right one. The political reason likely stemmed from the fact that Syrskyi's predecessor, Salochny, is well liked among Ukrainian soldiers, especially after his decision to cancel the attempts at a massive mechanized assault to break through the Russian lines on the southern front. This decision likely doomed the Ukrainian counteroffensive to failure, but saved many Ukrainian lives. Syrskyi, on the other hand, was known for following a more traditional Soviet-style approach, willing to sacrifice a large number of soldiers, much like his Russian counterparts. This is why I mentioned the 180-degree turn. Such an approach, however, would have only increased Salochny's popularity among the troops, which could have led to political disturbances.